We discussed a lot about law this morning, and I'm an attorney. I love the law. I respect it. I think it's great, but I would like to talk a little bit about life and the human impact that this issue has on me, my family, and the families we have here today. So to do that, I'd like to take us back to May 19th, 2010. On May 19th, I had a good day. I was having a good day. And on my way home, I got a call from my mother, which was not unusual because we speak 1,000 times a day. We still do. But this call was different. She was crying this time. And she said, "Sandy, come home." And she continued to cry. And she said they tried to rob him. So the him she was speaking of was my older brother, Thomas E. Wortham IV. Thomas and I were raised in a great family, full of character, but great. Our parents taught us we could do everything, be everything, the world was ours. But they also taught us that we had a responsibility to our community and to people who didn't have the opportunities that we had. And that's how Thomas lived his life. He dedicated his professional life to service. He served 2 tours of duty in Iraq with our National Guard, and he was also a Chicago police officer protecting the south side of Chicago where we lived. Now, when I got the call from my mother, I had no idea how bad this was. No idea, right? I just knew she was crying, but she's a crier sometimes. So I just knew I needed to get home. But shortly after I got the call, I looked ahead of me, and traffic was stopped. The police had blocked off all the streets on the way to our house. So I got out and started to run. I just said, well, let me just run home and see what's going on. And as I ran, an ambulance passed me. And still, in my mind, I had no idea this had anything to do with Thomas because I had no idea how bad it was. But I'm running down the street, and in retrospect, it was like a movie because it's like slow motion. So an ambulance passes me. But I know now that Thomas was in the ambulance because he'd been shot. And that's why all the streets were blocked off. So I go to the house. They rush us to the hospital. We get there. We waited. We prayed a lot. We waited. But Thomas died. My family is not an anti-gun family. My brother and father were Chicago police officers and carried guns most of the time. That's how I was raised. But they were trained, and they were law-abiding citizens. I value and respect the right, the rights that are provided by our Constitution. However, I find it very hard to believe that our founders intended those rights to go so unreasonably unchecked. It isn't about the right to take away, it isn't about the right to lawfully own guns. This is about trying our best to keep guns out of the hands of the people, like people who killed my brother. They didn't walk into a gun store and buy a handgun because if all the reports are right, they wouldn't have been able to do so. They got their gun the same way that many ill-intentioned people receive guns in this country. They bought it on the street. It's also a reality that their gun didn't arrive in Chicago on its own. Again, according to reports, it was trafficked from a pawn shop in Mississippi, and Chairman, you spoke about this earlier. According to news reports, a gun trafficker went to Mississippi, used straw purchasers to buy multiple handguns from that shop, and then brought those guns to Chicago to sell to gang members. And you spoke very well about this earlier, and that's a huge problem that we're talking about. And for me, as someone who's been personally affected by this, I can't accept that we can't do better than that. I can't accept that we can't fix that problem. If we know, as everybody here does, that many, many criminals obtain their guns through street purchases easily, then I feel like we have a responsibility to address that problem. And we have an opportunity through this body to do that. The only people who should be disturbed by common sense gun laws are people who shouldn't have guns in the first place, okay? Law-abiding citizens shouldn't be disturbed by the proposals here today. So when we speak about the Constitution and all the rights afforded by the Constitution, I think we'd also be well served to remember the words of another document in our country's history. So we talked earlier about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, those things were taken away from Thomas when he was 30, and quite frankly, our rights to those things have been affected by this situation. So we talk about lawful gun ownership. My brother owned a gun, my father owned a gun, but the fact that they were armed that night didn't prevent Thomas's murder. So we need to do more to keep guns out of the wrong hands in the first place. And I don't think that makes us anti-gun people. I think that makes us pro-law-abiding citizens who want to live life without the constant fear of this violence as a result of guns. I'm not here to say that any one law would have changed what happened to Thomas, but I am here to say I think we can do better. This isn't about me, Thomas, my family or any one family in general. This is about our country, and we have a system to affect change, to do something about this, and I think it's time that we do that.